The brass key bit into my palm before I even knew I was clutching it. I was still holding my fork, cake half raised, candle smoke curling past my face, when I heard my mother lean toward my father and whisper, low enough that she thought the table noise would swallow it, "Have your son changed the locks at her apartment tonight, before she figures out what we did." The candle went out on its own. Nobody at that table knew I could still hear a pin drop across a room. Nobody knew I'd spent 30 years training myself to listen for exactly this kind of sentence. I set my fork down very slowly, and I smiled because I already understood something none of them did yet. I was the she. My name is Eleanor Voss. I was turning 52 that night, and the apartment my mother wanted the locks changed on wasn't just an apartment. It was a 4-unit brownstone in Portland that I'd bought outright 11 years earlier for $612,000 in cash, the proceeds from selling the accounting firm I'd built from a card table in my garage into a 40-person practice with $3.2 million in annual revenue. I'd sold that firm 2 years before at 50 so I could finally breathe. I kept the brownstone as my retirement anchor. I lived in Unit A, and I rented the other 3 units to cover taxes and upkeep. It was the one asset in my life nobody else had their fingerprints on. Or so I'd thought. Sitting across that dinner table from me were the 4 people who mattered most. My father, Walter, 78, a retired postal supervisor who'd gone soft and pliable in his old age. My mother, Diane, 74, who had spent my whole childhood convinced my brother could do no wrong. And my younger brother, Curtis, 46, who had burned through 3 failed business ventures and 2 marriages, and who was, not coincidentally, sitting there wearing a new leather jacket he definitely couldn't afford on his own. Next to him sat his current girlfriend, Marisol, 31, dripping in a watch I recognized because I'd priced one just like it for myself once and blanched at the number. I smiled at my family, blew out my relit candle and thought, let's see how deep this goes. It happened 40 minutes after the whisper, when I excused myself to the restroom and came back the long way, past the kitchen, where the swinging door had stuck half open. Curtis had his phone out, screen angled toward Marisol, and I heard him say in the particular smug drawl he used when he thought he was being clever, "Once Dad gets Ellie's locks changed, we tell her the pipes burst, and she needs to stay with a friend for a few weeks while it's fixed. By the time she's back in, the paperwork's already filed. Mom already signed as co-trustee. It's practically hers." Marisol laughed, swirling her wine, my good Cabernet, the bottle I'd been saving, and said, "God, she really has no idea, does she?" 52 and still that naive. I stood very still behind that half-open door in my good navy dress, holding a small clutch that still had the brass key from my old childhood house fob attached to it, a keepsake I'd carried since I was 9 years old, the same key that never opened anything anymore. I didn't confront them. Not yet. I walked back to the table, sat down, and ate my cake. 3 days later, I drove to the county recorder's office under the pretense of updating my will. I requested a full title history on my own brownstone. There it was, a quitclaim deed amendment filed 8 weeks earlier, adding my mother, Diane Voss, as co-trustee of a trust one had never created. The signature on it was mine, forged but close. Close enough to fool a clerk who processes 200 documents a day. I confronted my mother that weekend, keeping my voice soft, almost apologetic. "Mom, did you know your name is on some paperwork for my building?" She blinked exactly once too many times before answering. "Oh, that's just an elder protection contingency instrument, sweetheart. Your father's estate attorney recommended it in case anything happens to you. Standard fiduciary language. You wouldn't understand the legal side." I nodded slowly, thanked her for looking out for me, and left. I pretended to accept it. But that week I quietly called the notary public whose stamp was on the forged deed. Her office was 2 towns over, nowhere near my mother's usual life. The notary remembered nothing. Worse, her stamp number didn't match her actual registration with the state. It was a stolen seal number, lifted from an entirely different notary in Salem. I sat in my car outside that office for 11 minutes without moving. I called Curtis, playing tired, playing scattered. "Curtis, honey, I found some weird paperwork with Mom's name on my building. Do you know anything?" He laughed, actually laughed before catching himself. Ellie, relax. It's just asset consolidation for tax efficiency. Dad's guy set it up so the family avoids probate fees when, eventually. Protects you. You should be thanking us. I thanked him. Then I quietly subpoenaed nothing because I wasn't a lawyer yet in this fight. I was just a woman with a laptop and 30 years of forensic accounting instinct. I pulled bank statements from the joint account my parents still kept me listed on for emergencies. For withdrawals $9,000 each over 4 months. Each one just under the $10,000 federal reporting threshold. $36,000. Structured. On purpose. I forgot my scarf at my parents' house the following Sunday and came back for it, letting myself in with my old key. I heard Curtis in the den on speakerphone with someone named Reggie. Once we've got Ellie parked in some rental for a month while the plumbing gets fixed, we push the refinance through. The brownstone appraises at $890,000 now. We pull equity, pay off my restaurant debt, and she never has to know the difference. She's too trusting to check the county records anyway. My mother's voice from the kitchen added, "She's always been slow with money stuff. It's fine." I stood in that hallway, 46 years of being underestimated crystallizing into something ice cold and perfectly clear. Slow with money stuff. I had run a $3.2 million accounting practice. I had structured audits for companies with more moving parts than my entire family combined. I picked my scarf up off the chair, said a cheerful goodbye through the doorway, and drove home obeying every speed limit exactly. That night I made a decision, and I made it with total clarity. I would become for a few weeks the woman they already believed I was. I started small. I let my hair go a little unwashed. I wore the same cardigan 3 days running, soft gray, slightly bobbled at the elbows, the kind of thing that reads as giving up rather than put together. I let my voice go thinner on the phone with my mother, adding a little tremor, "I've just been so tired lately, Mom." I let Curtis help me set up automatic bill pay on an account I'd already quietly drained of anything sensitive. I let my father pat my hand at Sunday dinner and say, "You've always taken things too hard, Ellie. Let your brother handle the grown-up stuff." I said, "You're right, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you all." Inside, my interior monologue ran like a ledger. Every predator relaxes around what it believes is wounded prey. If they think I'm confused, they'll stop hiding their tracks. If they think I'm defeated, they'll get sloppy in front of me. Sloppy people talk. Sloppy people sign things. Sloppy people leave phones unlocked on the counter. I kept the brass key from my childhood house clipped to my purse the entire time, running my thumb over it during every performance of weakness, like a private metronome reminding me, "This isn't who I am. This is a costume." I set the bait exactly 3 weeks later. I told my father in my new soft defeated voice that I was thinking about finally doing that refinance you all mentioned. "I trust you to handle it. I really don't understand the paperwork." I let it slip almost accidentally that I kept a folder of important documents in my kitchen drawer, including the original deed and a spare set of keys to Unit A. Then I did 3 things they didn't see. First, I installed a discreet camera disguised as a smoke detector in my own kitchen, angled at that exact drawer. Second, I left a decoy folder in the drawer, real-looking, official feeling, containing a fabricated refinance pre-approval letter from a bank I'd once audited, listing a fake appraisal of $910,000 and a fake co-signer release clause. Third, I gave my brother a spare key in case of emergencies, fully expecting he'd use it exactly the way I predicted. Then I waited. I sat in my rental car 2 blocks away with my phone propped in the cup holder, the live feed glowing on the screen, my coffee going cold. My phone buzzed once, motion alert, at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, while I was supposedly resting at Mom's. I watched in grainy black and white as Curtis let himself into my apartment with the spare key, walked straight to the drawer, found the decoy folder, and photographed every page with his phone, muttering to himself, "Perfect. Bank already thinks it's a done deal." I watched him call Marisol. "It's happening. Ellie's basically handed it to us. We just need Mom to countersign at dinner Friday and it's done." My hand didn't shake. I just wrote down the timestamp. Friday came. My mother had organized a family dinner at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated my birthday, full circle, whether she intended it or not. Halfway through the appetizers, my father slid a folder across the table toward me with a practiced, gentle smile. "Sweetheart, we just need your signature here. It'll make everything so much easier for you. You don't even have to read it. We've already gone over it." Curtis added loudly enough for the next table to hear. "Yeah, Ellie, just sign. You've never been great with contracts anyway." Marisol laughed into her wine glass. My good Cabernet again, I noticed, because apparently she'd never met a bottle of mine she didn't like. I set my fork down. Slowly. The same motion as the birthday dinner. Except this time nothing about me was uncertain. "Before I sign anything," I said, my voice calm, almost pleasant, "I want to read something out loud, just so we're all working from the same facts." I opened my own folder, the real one, and began in a level, unhurried tone. On March 4th, a quitclaim deed amendment was filed on my property using a forged signature and a stolen notary seal number belonging to a Salem notary who has no record of ever meeting me. Diane's fork clattered against her plate. On 4 separate occasions between April and July, $9,000 was withdrawn from a joint account under my name, $36,000 total, structured specifically to stay under federal reporting thresholds. Walter's face went the color of the tablecloth. On Tuesday at 2:47 in the afternoon, my brother let himself into my apartment with a key I gave him in good faith, photographed a fabricated refinance document I planted specifically to test him, and called his girlfriend to say, and I'm quoting directly, "It's happening, Ellie's basically handed it to us." I turned my phone screen toward the table, the security footage frozen on Curtis's face mid-photograph. And 3 weeks ago in my parents' den, I heard my own mother say I was too slow with money stuff to notice. I built a $3.2 million accounting practice from a card table in my garage. I don't miss things. I catalog them. The restaurant had gone very quiet around us. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the brass key, the one from my childhood house, the one that had opened nothing for 40 years, and I set it very deliberately on top of the forged deed. "This key hasn't opened a door in decades," I said. "But it used to mean home. You turned my actual home into a target. So no, I won't be signing anything tonight." Right on cue, because I'd arranged it that way, with a call to a detective friend from my old auditing days who specialized in elder financial abuse cases, 2 officers approached the table, having been waiting quietly at the host stand for the last 10 minutes. "Curtis Voss? We need to ask you some questions about a forged property document and a fraudulent notary seal." I picked up my glass of water, took one calm sip and, with a small deliberate motion, snapped the decoy refinance folder in half down the spine, the sound of tearing cardstock cutting cleanly through the restaurant's stunned silence. In the 6 weeks that followed, the consequences arrived like a well-audited spreadsheet, line by line, exact, undeniable. Curtis was charged with forgery, identity theft, and attempted fraud in the 2nd degree. Facing the stolen notary seal charge alone, a felony in our state, his public defender negotiated a plea, 18 months, with restitution of the full $36,000 plus fees, garnished directly from what remained of his failed restaurant's assets. Marisol, it turned out, wasn't just an unwitting bystander. Bank records showed she'd helped source the stolen notary seal number through a cousin who worked adjacent to a title company. She was charged as an accessory and quietly left the state before sentencing, resurfacing months later, according to a mutual acquaintance, waitressing somewhere outside Reno. My mother avoided criminal charges. The forged signature was traced conclusively to Curtis, not her, but the civil suit I filed named her as co-conspirator in the fraudulent trust filing. She settled by relinquishing any claim, real or implied, to my property, permanently in writing, notarized this time by an actual notary I selected myself. My father, who I believe genuinely hadn't known the full extent of it until that dinner, aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He sent me a letter 3 weeks later, an actual letter on actual paper, admitting he'd gone along with things to keep the peace, and that he was ashamed. I didn't respond, but I didn't burn it either. And in the middle of all that reckoning, I made sure to protect the people who deserved it. 3 tenants lived in my other units: a retired schoolteacher, a young nurse, and a single father working 2 jobs, all of whom had heard rumors that the building might be sold out from under them. I called each of them personally, told them their leases were untouched, and quietly knocked $75 off each month's rent for the next year, just to steady them through the noise. None of them had done anything wrong. They shouldn't pay for a war they never signed up for. 8 weeks after the dinner, on a night when the rain in Portland was coming down sideways, I heard a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw Curtis, soaked through, no coat, no umbrella, a duffel bag at his feet that looked like it held everything he currently owned. His restaurant was gone. His apartment gone with it. Marisol gone. "Ellie," he said, voice cracking in a way I'd never heard from him before. "I don't have anywhere else. Just for a few nights. Please." I looked at him for a long moment through the gap I opened the door to, no wider than the chain lock allowed. "You told a courtroom full of strangers I was too slow to notice what you were doing to me," I said, calm, quiet, final. "I noticed everything, Curtis. I noticed for months. The one thing I won't do is give you a key to notice things about ever again." I closed the door. I heard him standing there a moment longer, then the slow, defeated sound of footsteps retreating down the wet steps. I turned the deadbolt, my own lock on my own door, never once changed by anyone but me, and walked back into the kitchen where my partner Marcus was waiting with 2 mugs of tea already poured. "You okay?" he asked. I sat down across from him, and for the first time in almost a year my shoulders actually dropped. "Yeah," I said. "For the first time in a long time I actually am. Here's what I learned and what I hope you take with you. The people who count on you being too naive to notice are usually the ones with the most to hide. Being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's information, if you're patient enough to use it. And real protection of the people you love never requires deceiving them. It only requires the truth delivered calmly, at exactly the right moment. Have you ever had to play weak to expose someone who thought you were an easy target? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit home, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life justice stories, and I'll see you in the next one.